Good morning, everybody. This is Sarah Sapora here. I am the Director of Marketing for The Lonely Entrepreneur. Just giving it a moment or two while everybody signs in to join us. Michael, just letting you know that we can see all the tabs on your screen right now.
Yep.
Okay. I also want to point out to everybody that we do have a chat area. So if at any point in time during the conversation today you have a question, please feel free to jump in and ask. I will be moderating the chat and chiming in as best as I can to assist. I see Paula on here. Welcome, Paula. And Eugene.
Hi.
Hi, Eugene. And Olivia and Ashley, Kevin, Eva, Elizabeth. Wonderful to see new faces and some returning ones. And David with that adorable picture. Hi, Eric. Good to see you.
Hi.
Michael, just want to confirm that we can see what you're doing on your screen right now.
Yep. No problem.
You never know if Netflix is going to pop up or something. It's going to be Tiger King
Right.
on a
Exactly.
So let's give it one more moment and then we will begin. If you are not on mute and would kindly mute yourself, that would be great to help us reduce background noise. Thank you so much for those changes, folks. Okay, so I think we will begin today. As I said, my name is Sarah. I am the Director of Marketing here at TLE. I'm so excited. I am your Victoria for the day. So I'll take a moment and just remind everybody that if you have any sort of question, please feel free to chime in. This time is for you. We really sincerely want to hear from you. So there's no such thing as a silly question. Chime in that Zoom group chat area. I'll make sure that we get it addressed. I know several of you have sent me email questions in advance, but we will now kick it off and talk about the importance of our health and self-care while we walk into this new challenging chapter in our business growth. So Michael, would you take it away?
Sure. Thank you everybody for joining again. And we really appreciate everybody taking the time to, out of their busy day to share some of that time with us on a Friday while everything is going on. A couple of housekeeping notes. As you see in front of you, each week we're doing a different fireside chat. And the Entrepreneur Survival Guide that all of this is a part of is available on your screen as the site you see in front of you, lonelyentrepreneur.com/survival guide, or even on our homepage is a big blue button that jumps out in your face called 2020 Survival Guide. So feel free to take advantage and to share with your friends and colleagues. As you see that we've gone through a series of 6 weekly fireside chats, cash, revenue, expenses, back to cash again, and a little bit more on your plan. And today we're going to focus a little bit on mindset and staying healthy and some of the things that are really important to do along the way.
Michael, as we begin, one of the things that I think is really, really important, and I think that's a tenet and a core for the TLE brand, is authenticity. in sharing the struggle. So many of us experience the struggle as entrepreneurs and business people, but it's something that we don't talk about. There's shame, and we have fear that we're the only ones. But if you've read Michael's book, he begins with a really wonderful story that happened in the shower that I think is probably a moment that many of us can relate to. Will you share that story with us, one-on-one now, Michael?
Sure. What Sarah says is really so true. We all people sit in Starbucks next to each other and all have the same problems and never talk about them, right? And we're all trying to get to the same place and bring our passion to life. During the 2008 financial crisis, when things were really cratering quickly in our healthcare business, I remember I used to go to the gym every morning very early and sweat, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. And I went into the shower after I was done, and for some reason there wasn't any hot water. It was just cold, and I still had to take a shower, so I took a shower in the cold water. And for some reason, I had this kind of psychotic thought that, wow, if you could stand under cold water, freezing cold water in a shower, then what you had to deal with during the day wouldn't seem so bad. And then, so what I started to do was each day I would add a little bit of time under the cold shower. So even when the water was back and hot, probably the next day, I would never turn it on, and I would just sit there. And by the time, within a week or two, I forget exactly what it was 5 minutes, and that's the most I did. So I would stand there for 5 minutes just under the freezing cold shower. And what it really did for me at the time was then, and that's pretty hard. Try it. When you go in your shower tomorrow, try it for 30 seconds, much less 5 minutes. And it really made the rest of the day seem like not so bad, even though, as we all know, both then and of course now, it was pretty bad. And so it kind of shocks the system to push you to another level. We also, Sarah, we did an Instagram story this week where we talked about, when I played baseball at Bucknell, we used to basically field ground balls with no gloves and field ground balls with our eyes closed. And, when you're pushed to another level, like I was in the shower, or like I was then, it's really amazing that what you can address and deal with. Now, we're going to talk about later today how important it is to not just deal with it by hard things, but dealing with it by taking care of yourself as well. So for those of you who read the book, that's this first paragraph of the Lonely Entrepreneur book.
Michael, one of the things that you're saying, which I think can so easily be crystallized, is resilience, which is this word and this theme that you bring up a lot. But that resilience is about comfortable being uncomfortable. And the more comfortable we can be as individuals and entrepreneurs and business people with discomfort, the more resilience we have and the longer we're going to go. So it's the idea of how comfortable can I get with my own discomfort, and what tools can I put in place with my own business and my own self-care to help me be maximized for that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, we as entrepreneurs are usually very comfortable being uncomfortable, right? We don't walk into IBM, right, like everybody else does, right? So that discomfort is usually something that we're pretty okay with. The problem is when the foundations that we stand on, kind of get ripped out from under us. We're already on, teetering on solid ground because we don't have all the capital and the resources that we need, and we're very passionate about what we're doing. And I think that, one of the things that we're going to talk about in the beginning in terms of resilience. So resilience is one of these words like, accountability or teamwork, and what does it really mean? And I think it is, as you said, Sarah, accepting that you're uncomfortable, but really taking all the energy you have and trying to build a plan and focusing on the tasks at hand. Because what gives us resiliency is not, putting our hand on the hot stove over and over and over again and not getting results. What gives us resiliency is, okay, I'm going to take my effort and I'm going to put all of that effort towards getting a result. And as you see progress, even little progress, I get a PPP loan, or my customer pays me, or I cut my expenses. That's what makes us resilient, because it's one of those, nothing succeeds like success. So like everything we try to do at Lonely Entrepreneurs, we use this hokey marketing phrase called turn passion into success, but we really mean it, because passion and energy and fear and doubt and all those things that everybody feels is one thing, but how do you actually turn that into something? And that's where, as you said, Sarah, the doubt that you have and the concern that you have, how does it make you resilient? Well, it makes you resilient if you accept that uncertainty and then build a plan and try to execute on it. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on mindsets and some of the things that we're experiencing and we're feeling right now. And remember, all this about feeling about this stuff is really about translating into action, so you make progress and have a better chance of success, as we like to say, survive and thrive. And then I'm going to talk specifically about how you can do certain things to ultimately take care of yourself, because you will absolutely need to do that. And in fact, you know, when you think about all the different things that you're doing, and just how much is being asked about you at this time. And if any of you have attended last week's session on building a plan, you know, I very nonchalantly said, you know, you have to deal with cash, preserving cash, generating new cash, revenue, expenses, employees, communication, and very nonchalantly said, you got to do that all at the same time. Oh, that's really hard. And the amount of time and energy it takes is significant. At the same time, you're feeling risk, right? Of course. And you've got everybody else around you watching. It may be just you're an independent contractor and your clients are watching, but it may be that you're a 10-person company that has a board and advisors and investors, and they're watching. Or it may be your employees who absolutely are watching, not just how you handle them, but how you handle yourself in a crisis. You know, there's a famous Winston Churchill quote where he says, during World War II, when London's being bombed by the Germans, and he says, when you're going through hell, you just keep going. But that takes a toll. And so part of leading your organization through this is not just saying, I'm going to take it. You know, I used to use Sarah, you've heard me say before, I used to use the analogy of, you know, during that time, I'd get kicked between the legs about 10 times a day and I just stopped noticing. And that's not okay, right? It's not okay to stop noticing. You have to absolutely do all the things that we've been talking about here and do it with competence and determination and a ton of energy. But you've also got to acknowledge that if you're going to perform at your best, you've got to take care of yourself. And I'll share a little bit more about that when we get into it in a minute, okay? I wanted to just acknowledge a little bit of, and for anybody that knows The Lonely Entrepreneur, knows us, we don't let people wallow for very long. You know, people come to us all the time and we help them, and something bad will happen and we'll say, you know, you get an hour to, you know, wallow, cry, and eat ice cream, and now we're going to move on to what's the next step. But feeling overwhelmed right now is really an understatement. You know, we have a whole chapter in the book about feeling overwhelmed, and in normal times we feel overwhelmed, and now that's really times 10. You know, we use this analogy of, you know, when you're a normal entrepreneur pre-COVID, you're standing in front of a dam, and you know there's one hole that leaks, and you stick your finger in it, and then there's 5 holes, and you stick some other fingers, and then there's 20 holes, and you stick your toes, and then eventually you stick your tongue, and you run out of things you can use to plug things. And that's the way it normally feels. Now, with all the uncertainty that comes with this, feeling overwhelmed is certainly an understatement. Next is questioning yourself. There's a quote from an astronaut that said, I forget who it was, where they asked him if he's scared when he's sitting in the cockpit. And he goes, anybody who's sitting on top of 20,000 pounds of helium gas that they're about to light on fire, that isn't a little scared, doesn't really understand the situation, right? And it is incredibly natural to question whether or not you can do it. And that's okay. But, and there's always a but, now's the time to earn your stripes. Like, now's the time to show what kind of entrepreneur that you can be. Doesn't mean you have to do it yourself. Of course, we're here to help in any way we can. You've got colleagues, advisors, and what's been amazing about many communities in the midst of all this is how many people are willing to help with money and resources and support. And it's okay to question that whether you can do it. I would be lying to you if I told you that when all that stuff happened during 2008, I woke up the next day and said, yep, we're good. In fact, I told my father, he was like, what do you think? And I was like, all of our clients are the biggest companies in America and they're going bankrupt. And I think we got a 1 in 10 shot and it's going to take us 2 years to figure it out. It's okay to question it, but then you got to turn very quickly and dust yourself off to acting. But all the things that I'm talking about here about how we feel is what makes it so important to take care of ourselves in ways that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Okay. Next is, do I really have to fire my employees? We've talked about a couple of weeks ago about employees and expenses, and bottom line is you do the math and you may get the assistance of the Paycheck Protection Program, and that's great. But at the same time, you're going to have to deal with this, and you're going to have to communicate with compassion. You're going to have to try to give them a pathway to success for them. Because remember, even though we're thinking about our businesses, they have families and lives. You try to be creative. You try to align their compensation to results or split jobs, some of the things we talked about last week. But that's a pretty overwhelming thing. You're sitting across from people. I remember the people back in 2008, we had customer service and fulfillment reps that were either hourly or made $30,000 a year, that we were making decisions that impacted our lives. And that's a lot to bear when you're the leader of a company. Next is, and this is a particularly difficult one for entrepreneurs, is putting things on hold. We all, long for the days in which we get to be proactive and be strategic and start to put plans in place or go after our next round of financing with enthusiasm for where you're going. And a lot of times right now we have to put those plans aside. And that can be very humbling for us as entrepreneurs because we want to grow, we want to evolve, we want to innovate. But the job is survive first, right? There'll be time to thrive, but the first thing to do is to batten down the hatches and make sure that we're going to go to the next level. So I know the employee that you were about to hire that was terrific, that was going to take you to the next level in one area of your business, all of these things, the new product that you're thinking about launching. Now, don't get me wrong, this is certainly a really interesting time to launch new products and to do work you might not have otherwise been able to do. But it is something difficult to kind of put some of these plans on hold. And then finally, all of you that know Lonely Entrepreneur, our mantra is always around the 4 Ps, passion, pressure, pleasure, and pain. And normally you might experience all of these in the same week. In this time, you might experience them in the same hour. And unfortunately, there's not nearly as much pleasure, right, as we might want to see. So you have to bring that to bear kind of in your day-to-day life. And I'm going to try to talk a little bit about some of the things that I did and some of the things that I learned that were very counterintuitive for me, that really helped me kind of get through the challenging times of 2008.
Hey, Michael, quick note. We are still seeing the ESG screen. In case you want to toggle back and forth so we can see while you talk. So we can see you while you talk as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just, people see enough of me. I just wanted to show the the ESG. So thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. Of course. Great. I think that there's a couple of other things that I wanted to just kind of highlight a little bit of, which is, in fact, I'll turn that video on, Sarah, now that you said that. Thank you. Sarah, can you see me now?
No, I cannot.
Okay, gotcha. Just give me 1 second.
Oh, wait. Yes, I can. I can see you. I can see you.
Cool.
Guys, can you see Michael as well too? Chime in, let me know.
Great. So just a couple other things around the mindsets. We talked about, this concept of there always being a way, and you really do have to have that mindset and perspective for yourself as you go through this. Some of the things that you're going to be staring at just they don't work, right? When you do the math, they just don't come together the right way. And so you're always going to have to, listen, this is, I was going to say, you always have to believe there's a way. This is actually not something you have to convince a lot of entrepreneurs. It's usually the non-entrepreneurs that don't get this. We always believe there's a way, and we'll say, we'll just figure out how to do it. And then I want to touch a little bit just on what I said before about being resilient. We really think that resilience is a function of execution and activity. And some of the things that make you do better and feel better are things that make you resilient, right? So that is, as we've shared before, focus on the activity, not the emotion. If we really sat around today, certainly I could have done the same thing in 2008 and said, what if this lasts a year? What if, that doesn't do anybody any good. Is anybody sitting around saying, what if, and that what if is super positive? Like my business is going to quadruple. Some people are, and that's a great attitude to have, but really focusing on the execution and not the emotion of it, I think is super, super important. Next is, what makes you feel better is and more resilient is, how do you build a plan and execute it, right? And how do you focus? Okay, great. There's all this stuff going on across all the areas that I mentioned. Go build your plan, right? And come to work every day with your project management tool or with your task tool, and make sure you're staying on task and executing against your plan. And I'm going to talk a little bit about time management in a minute, but really, what makes you feel like you're making progress and chipping away at things? It's when you get some cash and you reduce some expenses and you win a new customer or you change your business model. I mean, so don't worry about all the things that you're not doing. Pick your tasks for a particular day and really try to stick to them. And focus on nailing the 5 things you say you're going to do and not the 95 things that you're not going to do. Okay. And then finally, and this is super important, and that is only spend time on things you can control, right? There are tons and tons of things that you can't do anything about that really can be not just a time suck, but an energy suck. And you need all of your energy to do this, you have to perform at a high level. So what does that mean? That means getting results, right? That means negotiating with vendors and getting your expenses reduced and getting the paycheck. But I mean, these all require us to actually get results in order to survive. And so every second that you spend that isn't spent on things that you can control and that are going to make a difference is wasted effort. And honestly, despite all the things we're talking about here about how hard it is, that's your fault. That's what you choose to do, right? So if you're going to be a good entrepreneur, then you've got to say, am I spending time on things that I can control and that I make a difference, right? And one of those things, which we're going to start talking about now, is taking care of yourself. Okay, Sarah. Before I kind of go on to that part of it, any questions?
No initial questions, just a quick quote that I think you might appreciate here, Michael. There's a lot of stuff that they talk about in personal growth, and one of them is the idea that we feel like we're innately promised things that are easy or comfortable, and the sooner we realize that things that are uncomfortable are actually growth and are actually meant for us, that it can be really liberating. And I think the same applies as business owners. One of the things that we quoted on your Instagram this week was the idea that if you're facing challenges right now that are related to your growth, you are lucky. So the fact that as entrepreneurs, that you guys and that all of us are here together to step up to the plate to keep your business working is a sign of your resilience and a sign of your tenacity, and something I think that so many of us can be really grateful for. And it's the idea that self-care is not selfish. As a leader, how you take care of yourself sets the tone for your organization.
Yep. It's a great point, Sarah. It's funny. The analogy that I used one time was that if somebody came into your office and you were interviewing for them for a job, and they said, well, I can't sleep, right? Would you hire them for their job, right? I mean, these are not counter to being successful in your business. They are enabling of it, right? And you'll hear from a couple of stories I'll tell in a minute why that was so counterintuitive for me. I think, Sarah, I always kind of cringe with what doesn't kill us make us stronger. Because certainly that ends up being true, but I can tell you that now, as you know, being our head of marketing and others involved in Lonely Entrepreneur, we feel blessed that this is our life's journey, that we could share it. But I can tell you at the time, it was like having an enema every day, right? And that's the way a lot of people on this call feel right now. They're like, oh yeah, it's going to make me stronger, but right now I can't pay the bills. So here's what I will tell you though. You will be pushed, just like standing in the shower. You will be pushed to do things you didn't think that you could do. right? You will be more creative than you thought you could be creative, right? You will figure out a way to make $1 turn into 10. You will be forced to do these things. You will negotiate in a way that you've never negotiated before. And I can tell you that when you come out the other side of that, you will emerge with a set of capabilities that frankly you didn't realize that you had. Because until you're really pushed to the brink, things don't expose themselves. You know, they talk about, if you ever heard of called Superman syndrome, where you know, a mother sees her baby trapped under a car, right? And the car weighs 5,000 pounds, and the mother actually lifts the car off the baby, even though by all scientific measures, she'd have no way to do that. You will be pushed to do things that are incredibly uncomfortable for you, but they will also, you will emerge with a set of capabilities that frankly won't even necessarily have just with your business life. In the future, people will say to you, well, can you do this? And you'll be like, yep, we'll figure it out. I'm gonna go do this, 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 and this. And people will think, well, wait a minute, that seems hard. Well, it'll seem easy at the time.
I have 3 words for you, and they're not completely inappropriate, so don't be scared. But the 3 words are embrace the suck. Embrace the suck, guys. Listen, those of us who are entrepreneurs and business people, this is a life that we chose, right? I would love to hear from you guys in group chat. Can anybody relate to this? You know, this feeling that you have that is insurmountable right now. You're allowed to acknowledge that this is painful. You're allowed to acknowledge that this is hard. But if you can embrace the suck, and if you can use that to fuel you, you will be able to walk through it. And like Michael says, find something stronger and deeper wells and reservations of strength than you ever knew was possible. So embrace the suck, Michael. You can borrow that one.
Great.
We've got a big yes from Kayla. I know Kayla understands that. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So let me I want to get into a little bit about time management first, because one of the things in really taking care of yourself is how you manage your time, because this all can seem really, really overwhelming. So first and foremost is about focus, right? Like you really, really do need to focus. And there's a lot of distractions. Now, granted, a lot of us are stuck at home, so there isn't as many distractions as before, but you've really got to focus on building your plan, executing your plan, right? Being really disciplined about your day, right? Setting specific times in your calendar to sit down and do stuff. Making sure that the conversations that you're having are focused on the areas that are going to get you the most return on investment in terms of so you might have gone to a networking function before, right? And you're kind of just exploring. You've got to eliminate a lot of those things. And you know, if you're gonna spend time, you know, watching virtual events, you know, make sure they're things that you can learn from, or things that are going to advance your business in some way, right? This requires incredible creativity. I know one of the things that's been happening in recent weeks has been a lot of barter deals where company A and company B, nobody has any money, but people have resources, and they'll say, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. And so I get your resources, you get mine, and everybody wins. So these things require a great deal of creativity during these times, okay? Next is a little bit about, time management. And this is something that has really helped me over the course of time, especially as you're creating new businesses and new industries. In the healthcare industry, when we were in back in the day, you know, we were basically reinventing an industry. It took an incredible amount of intellectual thought around the way to do it. And doing the hardest thing first thing in the morning is a really good habit to get into. You know, it's when we're the sharpest, when our gray matter is functioning the most. And if you sit down and you do that strategic plan, or you do your customer proposal, or right, and do that thing for the first thing in the morning, and then you finish it and it's 10 o'clock and you've got that behind you, you really feel like you're off to a good start in the day. And, you know, when you sit down to, like I used to do, is at 10 o'clock at night and do those, it's really hard to be at your best. Next is silence your technology. Closing your email, putting your phone on the other side of the room, closing your chat. You know, there's studies that show that when you hop back and forth between these things, it takes your brain 20 minutes to readjust every time you do. So really try to silence your technology and turn off your email, and make sure that you're focusing on the task at hand. Next is setting process and using process to make yourself more efficient. right? And again, this might be just you, or you might be running a 50-person company. The key is, okay, how do I set process that becomes the regular way that I manage all this chaos, right? So we talked about before, maybe you have a board of advisors that's willing to help you. Well, instead of having 10 random conversations throughout the week, maybe you have once a week, you get them all on the phone, call on the phone for an hour, and you focus for that hour on something you really want to accomplish. And that way people come back a week later knowing they're going to have that call every week, and it becomes more efficient. These are not groundbreaking ideas, but well-run organizations use process to create efficiency in what they're doing, and we need those types of things. And I'm going to talk about naps in a minute. And there's a whole bunch of other types of things, but I wanted to focus on one in particular, and many of you that know Lonely Entrepreneur know this one, and that is, don't evaluate your life in the middle of the fight. If any of you have ever watched a professional boxing match, usually right after the match, they interview the champ, and they say to him, "Hey champ, so amazing win. So rumor has it you're going to retire. Are you going to retire?" And almost inevitably they say something like, "Well, I'm thinking about it." Well, of course, he just got hit in the face for 3 hours, right? The time to evaluate whether or not you're meant to be an entrepreneur is not right now, okay? How often do we sit down and say to ourselves, you know what, I'm going to evaluate whether I'm an entrepreneur or not, once I won my big customer deal, or once I just closed my big investment. You never do it when good news comes. Now is not the time to evaluate. Now that is the time to put your head down, get your business to survive this crisis and take the next level. You absolutely must take time to evaluate and take stake in what you're doing. But now's not the time to do it. Now's the time to focus on your plan and try to give yourself the best chance of success. Okay. Sarah, any questions, or I'm going to keep chugging? Sarah, you may be on mute.
Sorry, guys, I was on mute there. Yes, no, keep chugging. It's 9:35 and you're sharing some great information, and I know you got a lot more tips. I can't wait for you to talk about the importance of stress and release and having a place to funnel your energy. So keep it going.
Great. So the way a lot of the people on here today are feeling is the way I felt back in 2008. I felt like there was we had a business that had, 60 million in revenue. It took us 10 years to build, and literally got cut in half overnight. All of our biggest clients were the big banks and healthcare companies that were getting decimated, and we were getting decimated with them. And the number of things that had to happen were kind of astronomical. If you remember, credit dried up, a lot of things that are happening now. So everybody's experiencing it the same way. We had 500 employees. Everybody knows the story. It literally took, we always kid around here that our big invention of the future is going to be the 30-hour day. We literally worked 20 hours a day for 3 years. I didn't see any way that we couldn't do it, and we would sleep a couple hours and just keep going, because there were so many things that had to go right and that had to be managed. And over the course of that time, as you can imagine, the energy level and the intensity level around that stuff was incredible. A lot the way everybody's feeling right now. And what you started to realize was that part of that day had to be your release. You had to have a way for it to go somewhere. And so much of your time was spent, working or sleeping. And if you didn't have that release, not only was it not going to be healthy for you, but it wasn't going to be healthy for your business, right? Because you weren't going to be able to perform, right? And you needed to perform at your highest level, pretty much every single day. So some of the releases that really helped me were, first and foremost, was working out. I used to get up very early in the morning and sweat every morning, and it really, as many of the people on the call, as we all know, that can really kind of unlock a lot of stress and kind of break through a lot of things. And that can be, anything for you, right? Everybody does it in different ways, shape, and form. Some people are cardio people, some people like to do yoga, whatever it is. But, when you're huffing and puffing, you're not thinking about your balance sheet, and that's a good thing. Next was, for those of you who may not know me, I have a darling niece and nephew, Raina and Brendan, whose house I'm actually staying in during the crisis. And back then in New York City, they were 4 and 2 when all this was happening. And my brother asked me one day on a Saturday, he goes, "Hey, can you watch the kids for an hour?" And I said something stupid like, "Dan, I don't have time to watch the kids. The world's collapsing. I got to save our business." Typical entrepreneur stupidity. And it was unavoidable, and they needed my help. And I went over there for an hour. I'll never forget it, 3 o'clock on a Saturday. And what was amazing was to watch 2 children that had genuine enthusiasm and would laugh and do all the things that little kids do, and could not have cared less about, what was going on in the world and the business. And being around that for an hour was incredibly relieving to me. And I begged my brother to let me do it every week. And I did it every week on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. And it was an incredible release for me, because it just took you totally out of our own stuff that we were going through. And you just watch little kids punch each other in the face and throw up and laugh for no reason at all. And it was really great. I won't spend too much time on the bourbon. You guys know that I'm a bourbon connoisseur, not connoisseur, but certainly spent a lot of time and learned a little bit about it. So I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to be alcoholics, but it doesn't hurt. I also got a lot of release by thinking about my father, who had spent literally 20 years commuting from central New Jersey into New York City every day to take care of his family on a bus, an hour and 45 minutes each way for 20 years. And I remember when I was just graduating from law school, I did that for one summer, and I was crying like a baby every day. And it just really helped me to think about some of the sacrifices that people had made. And it really was a release for me to go, okay, we're in the midst of this, and this is really bad, but think about what people do for their families over the course of time. And that led me into, we're all probably a little young for this, but some of the things that would happen in World War II. If you've ever read the stories, there's a lot of movies made about it on D-Day and Normandy, and basically all these young kids basically walking off the beach. I'll spare the gory details, to do what they did for their country. And I think sometimes we just lose perspective, and thinking about these things gave me a broader perspective on, the pressures. And while the pressures for us were intense, and the pressures for everybody here today are intense. And obviously we're dealing with something that is, really, really difficult and is like war, life and death, unlike 2008, which makes it incredibly much more important.
A couple of things,
sometimes
Michael. Could you
What's
lower
that?
your face a little? We see up your nose. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I chime in real quickly here? 2 things. We saw a couple people responding with, a lot of identification to the idea of embracing the suck. So, would you riff a little from Eugene on what could be both the ramifications of embracing the suck? So I would say, how does embracing the suck help us in our business or in our lives? And the other thing I was going to ask just now, you sort of scrolled down to it, but what are you guys doing for releases in your own life? For example, I'm actually a trained and certified level 1 Kundalini yoga teacher. So meditation plays a huge part in my life. And I was going to ask you if meditation was a part of yours, but let's get people chiming in that group chat to see what is a release and what is a way for you to channel your energy and channel for you right now. We'd love to hear. Melissa says meditation and working out too. Do we have other meditators in the group? Just out of curiosity, chime in and let me know. And lots of walks. Walks are the best. Yes. So chiming in a little there, Michael.
Totally. Yeah, I think with respect to the releases, I'll do the second one first. I know for me, like whenever I used to travel out, I'd jump in the water. Like for some reason, getting in a pool, getting in a hot tub in a hotel was always a release. It kind of got you out of your own way a little bit. I think that music was certainly a part of it. Everybody kind of needs and has their jam. So sometimes sitting at your computer or doing what you're doing, that can kind of get you tapping your feet and get you out of your own way a little bit. And I think everybody has their own, and you'll hear us talk about in a little bit about just being there when you're there. And I'll spend some time on that in a minute. So everybody has your own, but the thing about your releases is they have to take you out of your business thought, right? They can't just be on top of it, right? It has to be something that when you go sweat, when you meditate, when you watch a movie, when you have a glass of wine, when you get in the water, when you, whatever it is for you, when you play with your kids, you have to be away. Like you have to let the release you. And if you don't do that, it's kind of defeating the purpose. I think, Sarah, with respect to embracing the suck, I think it takes great leadership and character to take the circumstances in front of you that don't always look great, and plow forward. And so it will feel uncomfortable at times, but how many times is, we're talking about working out, how many times are you on the edge of something you didn't think that you could break through, and you just go and you do? And that not only has great benefits for you, but it has benefits to the people around you that are watching you, to watch you lead an organization, lead a group of people, even if it's a small group of people, through the chasm, can also be very empowering to them. Don't get me wrong, there are risks with respect to this stuff. You're kind of going after things, and you're going to have to go after them with risk. I remember when my brother and I were talking during the times in 2008, I would say, I get to choose between the lesser of two evils, right? Every single decision that I have to make right now is not black or white, they're all gray. And sometimes when you do embrace the suck, right, you're going to embrace it, and you're going to go, and you're going to make decisions without all the data that you need and all the information you need. And you just got to understand that every one of these decisions have risk. You're the leader, and so you're going to take on those risks, and deal with whatever consequences they have. But for the most part, the alternative of not embracing it and going after it can be, can be disastrous for your business. Okay. Next, I want to go on to sleep. So I started my career as an M&A lawyer in New York City. For any of you that have done M&A or have corporate lawyer friends in large cities, we work 24 hours a day. You often would negotiate things as a young person on way too little sleep. And that's just the world that I came from. And so when my company was really collapsing in 2008, the last thing that I was thinking about was sleep. And yet I was, asking myself to perform 20 hours a day with some pretty complicated things. And then one day in my office, I had a couch, and every once in a while I'd pick up the Wall Street Journal and read about it. I had a tough time reading the Wall Street Journal because every day I read it, it seemed like our next biggest client was saying they were going bankrupt on the front page of it. I remember it was 3 days in a row, General Motors, Washington Mutual, and Countrywide Financial, which were our three biggest clients at the time. It was literally 3 days in a row in the Journal. But on that particular day, in the mid-afternoon, late afternoon, I sat down and I started reading the Journal for 2 seconds, and I fell asleep on my couch for a half hour, like 4:30. And I felt so much better. And at 10 o'clock at night when I was still working, I felt so much better. And I started doing that every single day. This was not like the Spanish siesta. This was literally like to make yourself perform better. And then I started to really realize that's a skill, right? That's part of being a good leader, is being able to perform at your best. And I started doing that every day. And then I also started getting 8 hours once a week, every Wednesday, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I can't tell you how much better it made me feel for the week. And the other part of it is actually, and this is not the easiest thing in the world to do, is when you hit the pillow, when you get in your bed, you have to sleep. You have to teach yourself to sleep. If you sit there for 45 minutes and go, what if? That's 45 minutes you could be sleeping, right? So you actually have to really train yourself to focus on, listen, I've got to perform at my best. I need to be able to get this rest. And what is it that I do that helps me, get better sleeping? I can't tell you how much this helped me, knowing that there were times during the day where you needed so much energy and you just crashed for a half hour. I used to get really good at, still am actually, at the time you get on a plane until the time the little bell rings when you hit 10,000 feet is like 25 minutes. And I literally would be out and wake up 25 minutes later and be ready to go. So don't forget that sleep is not the antithesis of being a great entrepreneur. It's actually enabling of it. And probably one of the last substantive points that I want to kind of make is about when you do get away, right? There are very, very few times when we have so much work to do that we do get away. What I would encourage you to do, regardless of what that getting away is, whether it's your release that we talked about before, or it's just your time away, your brain needs time to rest. And a lot of the great creative ideas that you're going to need are not going to come naturally. You're going to have to think about them. And so the ability to kind of let the air out of the balloon, as we like to say, is a function of when you're not at work. Now, I know that means maybe going from one room in your house to another. When you're not at work, don't be there. When you're sitting down with your kids, right? When you're working out, when you're watching a movie, don't think about work, right? You have to be there and experience what you're experiencing, to be present, to let your brain rest, and to give yourself the opportunity to have the release that comes from being away from it, so you can go back to it with more energy.
Hey, Michael, I would love to chime in here. I know we've got about 15 minutes left, and I think one of the strengths in our community, and you certainly exemplify this when you come on and you share in fireside chats like this, is for all of us to be able to recognize and identify with each other. So I'd love to pose a question in our group chat right now. Guys, honestly, what is the biggest worry you feel right now in your business? What is the burden that you're carrying? This is a place to share with your peers and with each other. I'll share them, and maybe Michael will chime in. Kayla says that cash flow. Kayla, have you joined us for the other fireside chats we did about cash flow? I know that that's something that is on everybody's mind right now. I just, again, I think it's really valuable for us to share with each other what our greatest challenges are, so that as a group we can benefit from it all.
Well, I think also, Sarah, like we talk about cash flow, right? So the point is that what drives cash flow, right? What makes it happen? Cash flow doesn't magically appear. It's all the things you need to do. And the things we're talking about here about taking care of yourself and performing at your best are the things you're going to have to do. Think about how creative everybody's having to be right now about new revenue models, right? And you have to go negotiate with your vendors to cut your expenses, and you got to file for these PPP applications. So the things we're talking about here, cash is the result of acting on your plan and doing it with the right level of energy and the level of creativity and enthusiasm that you need. So
can you repeat that again? Because that was really, really brilliant. One of the things that we talk about and we keep going back to, guys, is the idea of having a plan. If you don't have that master plan, then you don't have the structure and the direction. Could you just repeat what you said, Michael?
Yeah, I think that, at the end of the day, people need more cash. We know that. But what actually drives that cash? One is, okay, you need, like you said, Sarah, this plan that lays out what are you doing with revenue and what are you doing with expenses and new sources of cash and all that stuff. But the other is you have to be able to perform, right? And bring your greatest of creativity to that plan. It isn't just show up every day and work hours. If all it was working hours, everybody could do it. It's you actually have to bring creativity, when you're negotiating with a vendor or you're coming up with a new pricing model or a new product. So getting sleep and taking care of yourself and getting releases and letting your brain get away from work are all would allow you to perform at a level that we're all being asked to perform at, which is far beyond what we thought we could do.
Melissa,
and the result is more cash.
The result is more cash. Thank you. Melissa chimed in, and I think this is a really cool opening door for us, that her biggest challenge is about continuing to build relationships that she started right before COVID, and to keep momentum of connecting with new potential clients. So can you chime in on that? How can we authentically build relationships and connections at a time where everybody is sort of turned upside down?
So what I would say is that building relationships should be no different now than it was before COVID. And what I mean by that is this. You should always care about and invest in what they care about. right? If you want to build successful relationships, those relationships come from thinking about the person on the other side of the table or the Zoom call and saying, what do they need? What do they want? What makes them successful, right? And now that may change now because of what's going on in 123, right? So always thinking about what is it that you are trying to accomplish, and is there a way that I can play a role in that, even if it's not necessarily something that adds economics to your business today, right? So Melissa and others, when you think about continuing to build those relationships, if you were building a relationship to provide a service to them in the past, that's probably going to fall on deaf ears right now, right? Because everybody's dealing with 123. But if you're building that relationships and asking how you can help with what they need, sometimes you won't be able to particularly do that, right? But that is how those relationships continue. I know there's an accounting firm we work with that was going after new clients and providing accounting services, and the gentleman that runs revenue there said, well, now obviously nobody's in the business of getting this stuff right now. I was like, hold on a sec. What better way to win a client than to put together, for example, how to help them with their PPP application? Don't charge them for it. Just tell them you're going to do it for free for them. Who wouldn't want to be your client if you're doing that for them when they're not paying you anything? So thinking about what your prospective relationship is important to them and what they need at this time. It might not get you $1 today, but I can assure you it'll get you $1 tomorrow.
Beautiful. Michael, that's actually a point that is taken directly from the ESG manual. So if you guys haven't already done so, this is a wonderful reminder for you to jump online and actually download the manual. It's a beautifully graphic designed piece of artwork that somebody on this call may have done. But one of them that I specifically remember is talking about how you can offer service to people at a time that they need it, which may not, like you said, have any actual economic impact for you in the short run, but this is about building relationships in the long run. And this is an opportunity to go above and beyond and serve them with something unexpected that They will always remember that you took the time to do, rooted in authentic service.
Yep. And Sarah, you see on the screen there, customers for life will be born in this crisis. My largest client in CentOne at my company was somebody that I went out of my way to try to do something for in the midst of everything that was going on. She worked at a very, very large company. And I did something to help her daughter with a job. And when I sold my business in 2013, that company was the largest company I had with an $8 million a year contract with my client. And now, if I provided a lousy service or blah, 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 they wouldn't have been that client, of course. But to this day, I'm incredibly close with this person, and it had nothing to do with business. It was just that in 2008, her daughter went through something that was related to her job and stuff like that, and I helped her out, and it made all the difference in the world. Customers for life will be born during this crisis, but if you pick up the phone and say, pay me something for my service, that's not usually how it's going to happen.
Awesome. Everybody, we are nearing the end of our chat, and I always want to make sure that we take the time to address any questions that anybody has. So now is a great time for you to chime in the group chat with a question. And while you do so, I'll share something that somebody actually messaged us on Instagram, Michael. When it comes to sort of mindset and self-care for entrepreneurs and business people, besides your book, obviously, who are the resources and tools out there that you like and that you refer to, that you feel like you can relate to as a professional, that people who sort of believe in your work and in your teaching can learn from as well? So who else do you like out there?
It's really interesting, Sarah. None of this stuff comes from the entrepreneurial space, because I always feel like, just like the shower example that we started with, I always feel like when you really stretch yourself, then the context that you're in today, you have the ability to perform at a much higher level. So the stuff that I've always read, so you say, okay, what really stretches? Well, like I said about 2008 was a very difficult time, crazy things going on. But I used to say it wasn't life and death, right? Literally. Now, obviously, unfortunately, we're dealing with life and death with COVID. But the stuff that I really read, Sarah, was that, if you read about Colin Powell, for example, and where he came from, and you read about like military leaders and what it was like to be, in the midst of real war, and you read about Winston Churchill and the burden of what he had to do to lead a nation during a crisis. And any of you who've read about Winston Churchill at all, Winston Churchill was not considered a particularly effective leader until the war came. And the character that he showed and the steadfastness he showed during the war. So Sarah, the stuff that I look at isn't entrepreneur stuff. It's stuff where people were stretched beyond. And a lot of times that stretching beyond were things that happened over a long period of time. If you ever read about Martin Luther King and the challenges that he faced, and if you read about people that came from nothing and from nowhere, right? And somehow, despite having 4 kids and 2 jobs, and all of a sudden, made it. And you watch the day-to-day, right? I get up every day. I have 4.3 kids. I have 2.3 jobs, right? And I do that every day with a smile on, right? And I do that every day, and I guide my children around me. To me, that's like so beyond to do that every single day with no money, and sometimes, looking from the outside, no hope, but they just never look at it that way. They always look at it with hope and opportunity. And to me, those are the things that stretch beyond, my product didn't launch on time, and really gives us some context about what we can do if we're really, really pushed to new heights.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Michael, you've got just a couple more minutes left. It's 12:56. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap us up?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for chiming in. I think that as entrepreneurs, people sometimes don't really understand, our thought process and what we go through. And when we have those quiet moments to ourselves, we know that what we're doing is important. We know that, as we like to say, being an entrepreneur is not a job, it's an identity. But it is hard. It's hard during normal times. I'm sure many of us on the phone have gone back and said, man, this was tough before, and now this, right? But the job at hand, right, is to be able to focus and build a plan and take all the energy you have trying to get from point A to point B. And that point A to point B is sometimes it's just a little bit of cash, and sometimes it's just a little better, a level of expenses or whatever it is. But in order to do that, in order to take all the energy and provide all the leadership and build a plan and execute a plan and line up your employees and you've got to be able to have the energy to do it. And that energy requires you to do some of the things we talked about here today in terms of getting your releases, getting your sleep, being away when you're away. I know for all the moms and dads out there that are stuck with their kids all day long, it may seem far-fetched to, when you look at your kid, really smile and take it all in. But those are the things that ultimately release your stress and your tension to be able to perform at your best, because you have to perform at a level that's beyond what you performed before, even though you might have been working 24 hours a day before. So I would encourage you to try to take advantage of these and others. And, for some things, it's just, your playlist, right? And jamming out to that. And for others, obviously, it's more significant things that can really give them the opportunity to rest and breathe and be at their best when they need to be there.
Great. Michael, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that these fireside chats are such a wonderful opportunity for us to connect to each other and to hear firsthand from Michael and to share and to ask questions. And we're certainly grateful for all of you guys for joining us. I know we've got another one coming up next week. Keep a lookout for the announcement of the theme and for what we'll be talking about. Please don't forget to join us on social media. Chime in with any questions you have. And I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.